Hey Vikings Nation, what's going on? Buckle up, because today's update could define the entire future of this team, and trust me, it's not being talked about enough. We're diving deep into a situation that could make or break the Minnesota Vikings in 2026. Right now, there's a massive question hanging over this roster, and it's not just about who they added, it's about what they didn't fix. And if you think last season's issues magically disappeared, think again. Stay with me because what I'm about to break down might completely change how you feel about the Vikings heading into the draft. And I want to hear your take by the end, because this one is big. A year ago, the Minnesota Vikings were making noise across the entire NFL. They weren't just active, they were aggressive, throwing around nearly $270 million in free agency deals. That kind of spending usually signals one thing: a team going all in. Fans were hyped, expectations were sky high, and it felt like Minnesota was building something dangerous. But fast forward to now, and things didn't exactly go according to plan. Instead of a deep playoff run, the Vikings ended the season sitting at 8-9, leaving fans wondering where it all went wrong. And here's where things get complicated. That massive spending spree came with consequences. The salary cap situation heading into 2026 is tight, really tight. Because of that, the Vikings were forced into some tough decisions. High-profile players had to go, and suddenly this roster started to look a little thinner than expected. That aggressive approach from last year has now turned into a cautious one. And if you're a fan, you can feel it, this offseason just doesn't have the same energy. When it comes to free agency this year, the Vikings have been quiet, almost too quiet. While other teams are making moves, Minnesota has been sitting on the sidelines. Now, yes, they did bring in Kyler Murray, but let's be real about the situation. This wasn't a blockbuster financial move. They were only able to pull it off because he came at the league minimum, with Arizona covering the rest. Smart? Absolutely. But it also shows just how limited the Vikings really are right now. And outside of Murray, what have we seen? A couple of depth additions, James Pierre and Johnny Hekker, but nothing that screams game changer. These are solid moves, don't get me wrong, but they're not the kind of signings that fix major roster issues. And that's exactly why the pressure is now shifting to the NFL draft. Because if Minnesota doesn't get it right there, things could get ugly. The Vikings currently hold 9 picks in the upcoming draft, and that gives them flexibility. But it also raises the stakes. Every pick matters when you're dealing with limited cap space. There's no room for mistakes. And according to analysts, there's one area that absolutely cannot be ignored, no matter what. Let's talk about the secondary. Because right now, that's the biggest red flag on this roster. Despite having an aggressive and creative defensive scheme, the success of this system depends heavily on coverage holding up. And last season, that didn't happen consistently, not even close. The Vikings generated pressure at one of the highest rates in the league. That's the good news. The bad news? Opposing offenses figured out how to beat it: quick passes, exploiting weak coverage, and attacking mismatches in the secondary. It didn't matter how good the pass rush was. If the coverage broke down, the defense fell apart. And that's exactly what we saw happen over and over again in 2025. Teams targeted this weakness relentlessly. They knew where to attack, and they took advantage of it in critical moments. Big plays, blown coverages, missed assignments, it all added up. And against top-tier quarterbacks, that's a recipe for disaster. Now think about the division. You're facing quarterbacks like Jared Goff, Jordan Love, and Caleb Williams. These guys can read defenses, adjust quickly, and punish mistakes. If the secondary isn't fixed, they're going to pick this defense apart. So what's the solution? The draft. And it starts early. There's a growing belief that the Vikings must use their first-round pick, number 18 overall, on a safety. Not a luxury pick. Not a maybe-later move. A must. Because right now, the depth at that position just isn't intimidating. Let's break it down. If Harrison Smith returns, that helps, but he's not getting any younger. And even if he does come back for another season, the future still needs to be addressed. You can't rely on a veteran forever. At some point, the torch has to be passed. And if he doesn't return, that situation becomes even more urgent. Looking at the current options, Josh Metellus, Jay Ward, and Theo Jackson. It's a group with potential but not dominance. There's no clear enforcer. No game-changing presence that scares opposing offenses. And in today's NFL, that's a problem you can't ignore. So who could the Vikings target? That's where things get interesting. Top prospect Caleb Downs will likely be off the board by the time Minnesota picks. But there are still intriguing options with high upside. Names like Dylan Thieneman and Emmanuel McNeil-Warren are starting to gain attention. These are players who could step in and make an immediate impact while also developing into long-term solutions. And remember, the Vikings don't just have one pick, they have 9. That means they can address the position early and still add depth later in the draft. That's the kind of strategy that could completely transform this defense. Because if the secondary improves, everything else starts to click. The pass rush becomes even more effective. The scheme becomes more dangerous. And suddenly, this defense goes from vulnerable to elite. But if they miss, if they ignore the warning signs, then we're probably looking at the same story all over again in 2026. So now I want to hear from you, Vikings Nation. Do you think the team should go all in on fixing the secondary in the draft? Or is there another position you'd prioritize? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. Let's get this debate going. And if you're loving this kind of deep dive Minnesota Vikings content, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with every Vikings fan you know. Because this off-season is just getting started, and things are about to get very interesting. SKOL.